My husband won't stop texting his coworker and doesn't even bother hiding it from me anymore. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. My husband got a new job about a year ago. He finally started earning a lot of money and he really loves his job. I'm a substitute teacher, so at the time, we were really broke. We were desperate for one of us to get a better job. A few weeks after he started his new job, his boss threw a party so that we could all get to know each other. And this is when I met Karen. Karen right away came up to me and tried to make me feel like she was my best friend. She started talking to me about really personal stuff right away. In other words, she was trying to let me know that I could trust her because she was telling me her deepest, darkest secrets. But I don't fall for that kind of easily. As the barbecue went on, I kept noticing that she would talk to my husband a lot. And my husband would reciprocate. If he was at the bar, she was at the bar. If she was trying to grab food, he was trying to grab food. I called my husband out on it and he told me that they were really close friends at work. And that she was basically his work wife. I told him he needed to stop that real quick. Otherwise, I would move in with my parents. For the rest of the barbecue, he behaved like a little lamb. Only 2 weeks later, I find messages between them. Part 2 is up. Husband won't stop texting his coworker and doesn't even bother hiding it from me anymore. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. 2 weeks later, I find messages from Karen on his phone. At that point, I had completely forgotten about Karen. Husband and I try to do date nights every single week. On this one occasion, we sit down at a restaurant, and his phone kept going off, pinging almost every single minute. He wouldn't turn off the sound. 7th time it rang, I decided to pick up the phone only to silence it. I mean, at this point, I have no reason to not trust him. But when I take a quick glance at the messages, it said work wife. My blood instantly began to boil. That's when he tried to take the phone from me, but I pulled it back. Open the messages and see that they were having a conversation about me and him going to dinner. And how jealous she was that she couldn't come with him. Mind you, we're sitting in the middle of a restaurant. That's when my husband says, go ahead and read it. I look at him and I couldn't recognize him. Like, I literally could not recognize his face. He looked like a different man. He was no longer the considerate, loving husband. He was now just some other guy texting another girl. As I read through the messages, the tears started flowing down my face. And I made a scene. I told him he needed to stop texting her. Then he says, no, I like her. Why would I stop? Part 2 is up. My husband won't stop texting his coworker and doesn't even bother to hide it from me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. That's when he told me that he liked her and why would he stop texting her. I actually had to sit there at the restaurant and explain to my 30-year-old husband why it was inappropriate for him to be texting his work wife. He said they were doing nothing wrong by texting each other. That's when I told him that if he didn't stop texting her, that he could forget about me. He said that there was nothing wrong with him having friends. I told him that friends shouldn't tell each other that they're jealous if they're going out with their wife. And he explained that it was just banter. She loves playing at being jealous. Ew! Then he said this, would you rather me hide the messages from you? My stomach sank. This man clearly does not understand that what he's doing is wrong. We've never had a problem like this before. We've been married 3 years and this has never been a thing. I got up from the restaurant and took an Uber home. Do you think he chased me? No. It wouldn't be another 4 hours until he got home. I asked him where he'd been and he told me that he was just chilling at the restaurant. For 4 hours? I asked him once again if he would stop texting her and he said no. That again, they were not doing anything wrong. But their messages were like boyfriend and girlfriend messages. Things like, what do you want for lunch this week? I miss you. I'm jealous that you're going to dinner with your wife. After he said no, I packed my overnight bag and I went to his parents' house. My parents live 2 hours from me. I told his parents everything and they went over to talk to him right away. And they were pissed. His dad even threatened him to take him out of his will. His parents have my back and told me that I could stay with them. But instead, I went home to my parents. I also just found out that Karen has a boyfriend. Should I tell her man? Or should I just divorce my husband and forget the whole thing? Whatevs.
In high school, I was standing outside of a dance, and this girl who I'd never seen before in my whole life came running up to me all excited and screamed, Kate! And she gave me a huge hug. She didn't go to my school. She wasn't from my town. And everybody was like, oh, you know Kate? And this girl said, oh yeah, Kate and I go way back. And she said, wait a minute. Do you go by Kate or do you prefer like Katie or Caitlin? And I said, no, I go by Kate. What do you go by? And she looked so hurt and wounded. And she said, Emily. And I was like, right. Like, I know your name is Emily. Obviously, I was just like, do you go by M or Emma or anything like that? And she said, oh no, just Emily. And then we were friends, I guess, but I don't remember ever meeting her. And she added me on Facebook later that night. And we just, I pretended like I knew her for a long time because that's what she said. And she looked so hurt when I didn't know her name. And we stayed friends for years after that. We've fallen out of touch now, but I think about her all the time. Because did I know her from like grade school or something and forget about her? Or did she gaslight me into being friends with her? She just walked up perhaps and pretended like we'd known each other for a long time? And gaslighted me into being her friend? I mean, I don't think that highly of myself that someone would feel the need to do that. Because that's kind of crazy, but also brilliant. She just, like, skipped past the whole getting to know you part of relationship. She was like, this is one of my old friends. And I was like, okay. And then we just acted like old friends. We didn't do small talk because apparently she knew everything about me. The more I explain it, the creepier it sounds.
was already late to drop off my daughter this morning to school because I woke up late because being pregnant is just, you know what? Take that birth control. Okay, anyways, back to the point. So on the way to school, I'm like, why is everybody slowing down? Why is there so much traffic? Why is there a duck in the middle of the street? But like, the duck knows what it's doing, okay? It has the capabilities up here to understand that it's making us all late. Because that duck looks at us, looks back, walks like this. Like, it's New York Fashion Week. And I'm like, bro, are you serious? Like, we don't got time for this. Turns back around, gives us a glance. It almost looked like it winked at us like, I was like, bro, you're about to be chicken wings in 3 seconds if you don't move out of this way.
Am I wrong telling my mother-in-law off after she breastfed my daughter? Ew. I, 35 female, have a beautiful baby girl who is 3 weeks old. Husband is a travel nurse and has recently left for another state again. My mother-in-law moved in with us prior to me being 6 months pregnant. She had a severe gambling addiction and got into heavy debt. My husband paid it off and unfortunately used half of his income. Her debt ate about a huge portion of our savings account. She would kiss my belly and say, "How's my daughter doing in there? I can't wait to meet you. Hey little girl, if you act up, I'm gonna have to spank you." She then laughed it off like the sicko she is. When I gave birth, I wanted only me and my husband in the room, as this is one of the most vulnerable times of my life where my lady parts are going to be exposed and I'm going to experience the hell of labor. My mother-in-law screams and cries saying I'm being inconsiderate. I tell her she won't be in and that's final. Well, my baby girl arrives and I'm so darn happy. Shortly after maternity leave is over and I start work, my mother-in-law is now watching my baby girl. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I tried to take a nap and I woke up to my mother-in-law breastfeeding my daughter. I run downstairs and scream at my mother-in-law and take my daughter out of her arms. I told her what she did was disgustingly horrible, awful, and just generally was so out of line. My mother-in-law confesses that she had been lactating and has been doing tips for breastfeeding and they had worked. I am pissed and generally grossed out. I tell her off and hours later I get a voicemail from my brother-in-law, sister-in-law, father-in-law, and everyone in the family that what mother-in-law did was cute and that I was in the wrong. Who in their right mind, I don't care how old your mother-in-law is or how old grandma is, to be breastfeeding your kid? That is so weird. That is nasty. That's disgusting. Like, oh my God, stop. Ah.
I'm in a silly, goofy mood, so I'm going to tell you more about growing up Pentecostal. Vigilias were wild, my dude, because who invented these? Who created these? For those who don't know, vigilias were practically an all-nighter, but at a church. They were always done on a Friday night. It started at 8 p.m. and it ended till like 2, 3, 5 a.m., depending how they was feeling that night. Nobody could leave. The doors were locked once the vigilia started. They would sing every Christian song known to humankind, pray and preach for like 6 hours. And like, I'm just a little kid. I was tired. I was exhausted. But if my mom catch me sleeping, levántate. But I think she realized sometimes we couldn't survive, so she would let us sleep under the benches. And yes, it's basically an extra long service. I don't get why they couldn't have divided this across a couple of days. After we like finished reading half of the Bible, the best part was when we got out, we got to drink cafecito and some conchas.